When people ask me how I got to Yale, I usually think a little bit of luck and a whole lot of walls. My name is Callegari, and well before I started my social venture here at Yale, and well before I was a structures engineer at SpaceX, I was a curious boy in the poor community of Deltona, Florida. Growing up, I loved to build things, and my dad was the most talented engineer I knew. But my dad never graduated high school. He was a laborer in the construction field and routinely fixed parts of our house, our car, and our neighbors' houses and cars as well. I remember distinctly that he would take me to junkyards sometimes to find really cool items I could break apart and build things with. Like an old functional vacuum that I turned into an old non-functional vacuum. Or a 50cc engine that was scrapped that I took apart and rebuilt with him and put on my bike. It went a little something like this. I found this engine, I was like, this is really cool. I have no idea what to do with it. I don't even know how it works. And he was like, you can do something with it. And so I got my bike, I have this engine, I'm like, how do I mount it? And I ended up digging through the dirt and finding scrap pieces of metal and screws on the ground and just like screwing it into the frame. He wasn't around at this time, he would have never let me do this, but I put the engine on. I was like, oh, this is perfect. Now I just need to find a chain. I found an old rusty chain in the trash, put it on, put the sprocket on. I was like, it's perfect. My Frankenstein bike. Mind you, the engine was like 25 degrees off. Like it was way, way dangerous, but I was gonna do it. And he came back around and he was like, he looked at it and he was like, good luck, buddy. Which I think was a learning experience. He knew that I was gonna learn from this. So, I get on the bike, I start it up, and it goes, which is crazy because I had no idea that it was going to work. It starts running, and I hit the throttle. The moment the throttle engages, everything just blows apart. The screws come flying, the chain comes off, hits me in the leg, tears a hole in my pants, and I was beaming. I was so excited. I was like, this is the craziest thing ever. I'm hooked for life. And my dad is the one who led me down the engineering journey. My mom was a stay-at-home mom who loved her job, taking care of 3 rambunctious boys, and she did anything for us. As an example, I remember being at a friend's birthday party when I was a teenager and seeing a car, in front of the house just slowly driving by, distinctly looking like my mom's car, but the tinted windows were rolled up, the person inside had their shades on, so I couldn't quite tell. But the 3rd time it rolled around, that's when I knew. It's like my mom's watching me, and everybody at the party knew that she was also watching them too. It was really a testament to how devoted of a mom she was. In hindsight, at least, during the time, it was very embarrassing, but I love my parents and they did so much for me. Together, they raised a family, started a home, because previously they both had experienced houselessness and wanted to start something new for their family. My mom experienced houselessness when she was growing up, living in friends' apartments and hotel rooms for periods of time due to financial reasons. And my dad was homeless for a period of time with his siblings after he was kicked out of the home at age 15 by abusive parents. After they met, which was at an auto shop that my dad was working at, they decided that they were going to create stability in their life for their family that they didn't have growing up. They saved up enough over time and got their first home, which is where they still live today. And it wasn't much. The living room was once the carport, and I shared a room with my 2 brothers. But it was our home. And it went through a lot. And I'm not just talking about, hurricanes, Florida men chasing people with mailboxes down the street, or alligator sightings, although we had our fair share of that too. It was the same home that experienced fists flying in frustration over heated arguments over making ends meet. The same home that was a few hundred feet away from where a neighborhood friend's body lay motionless after an accident took his life. The same home that helped shelter a neighbor whom I rescued from the street, hair ablaze and wounded, a victim of domestic violence. The same home that not only protected us, but took part in protecting those around us as well. Needless to say, I was a little bit anxious growing up, maybe a little bit ADHD as well, and had trouble sleeping at night. To help me sleep, I would find myself rubbing my hands along the plastered walls, a worm finish that my dad applied to help calm me down. These walls served as a stability in my life that I could always come back to, the walls that protected me. Unfortunately, my parents never had this stability growing up. Impoverished and abusive households defined my parents' upbringings. Luckily, their moral compasses and outlooks on life remained intact. Their siblings, my aunts and uncles, however, were less lucky. As you sit there in the audience right now, I want you to really take a moment and reflect on how you got to the seats you're sitting in. To be sitting here at an institution like Yale, listening to talks like the ones here today, likely means that a lot of good things must have happened in your life. I'm sure it's been a journey with a ton of hard work and perseverance. But let's not kid ourselves. We must have gotten pretty lucky too. The context of where we're from and the circumstances we were presented helped us get to where we are today. Unfortunately, there are people in this life that are less lucky, whether it's the context of where they're from, or a devastating diagnosis, or a wrong turn down a one-way road. That was almost me, or at least it felt that way, as things do in middle school. Deltona Middle School, the middle school I attended, was the central middle school in our poor, overlooked community. The students brought with them the pain from their homes. You know, it's characterized by like gang violence, drugs, crime, you name it. To help characterize the school, let me give you a little walkthrough of how it was like to use the restroom at DMS. So you'd leave the classroom, you'd walk outside, you'd go to the restroom door, you'd listen pretty closely first, make sure it's safe, then you'd slowly push open the door. 50-50 shot, there are bodies on the floor and there's a crowd around them, either laughing or crying. Those bodies were passed out from drugs or the knockout game. The knockout game, for context, is when you stand against the wall, breathe in, and exhale. The moment you get to the bottom of your breath, right in the gut, punch, and it knocks you out cold. Now, these people that were on the floor were actually not who you would expect. Some of your close friends, some of the best students in school were the ones that were on the ground. The reason for this was the peer pressure from those students that were going down the wrong path. Now, I was in a situation as well where I succumbed to peer pressure and almost was in a position like them. One day at lunch, some of my friends came up to me and asked for some help. Some of their friends had been jumped earlier that morning by some gang members, and threats of violence were escalating on both sides. They needed to answer back, and for some reason, they needed my help. Now, I'm not the tallest person in the world, kind of short, and I definitely wasn't tall in middle school, and my voice sounded like Mickey Mouse, but for some reason, they wanted me to help, and for some reason, I said yes. And before I knew it, I was standing right here in front of the middle school, 10 of us, many of us carrying weapons. It was going to be a bloodbath, and I was going to be right in the center of it. But luckily, the other side never showed up, and I got away with nobody finding out what had almost happened, including my parents, who are finding out right now. But that is luck. And thankfully, I capitalized on that luck and was able to wisen up a bit and never put myself in a position like that again. Unfortunately for my aunts and uncles, they were less lucky. Without the stability of a true home and without a strong support system, many of them turned to crime and violence. Some of them have spent more of their life in prison than out of it. Some of the things that they've done include like selling drugs to minors, assault, and some other things that I can't name. But the truth is, many of this was driven by circumstance and a lack of luck. Deep in their core, they're just like you and me. They're good people. They just didn't have those same walls to press their hand against when they needed them the most. Up on the screen is my uncle and his son a few months before he passed away, one of my favorite photos of him. Although he was looking to serve for a very long time for things I can't disclose here today, he was one of the only uncles to ever show up for his family and my brothers and I, and he always had his family's back. Fast forward through a series of lucky events in my life. A guidance counselor that helped me, saw the potential in me somehow, and helped me get into Questbridge. My time at Princeton, where I first got my butt kicked, in classes, but used that as a learning opportunity and made my way out of there to Berkeley, where made it through the COVID pandemic. Congrats to you guys as well for surviving that. And I end up at SpaceX. Now, if you told the kid that was working on that bike that basically blew up, that he'd end up here at SpaceX, he'd be like, no way. I'm going to be working with my dad as a laborer. I'd never be there. There's no way I could make it. But luckily I did. At SpaceX, I was a structures engineer for the Dragon spaceflight program, the premier spacecraft taking US and international astronauts to space. And the best part is that I was responsible for the toilet seat. Okay, I was responsible for a little bit more than that. The major thing that I was responsible for and that I loved deeply were the interior walls of the spacecraft. Now, calling these walls, it's a bit of a stretch. Technically, they were really thin composite laminates that were non-structural aesthetic closeouts, which basically meant that damaging them didn't affect the performance of the spacecraft. But I knew the importance of these walls. These were the same walls that the astronauts would be staring at during debatably the riskiest and most consequential moments of their life. The same walls that they'd be able to reach their hands out and press when they needed the security of the spacecraft. I also knew that these walls weren't the same as the walls I grew up with. These were walls for a few very lucky people, although very hardworking and humble as well, that had aspirations of leaving Earth for the moon, Mars, and beyond. But what about the people here on this Earth? I knew I should, and I could, do something about it. It was time to use my luck to benefit others. And that is how I ended up here at Yale, working on something I'm deeply passionate about. My social venture, Impacted, aims to 3D print sustainable housing for those experiencing houselessness, giving these people a chance to have the same walls that I had growing up when I needed them the most. We're taking a first principles approach to the way that we tackle complex structures and tackle thorny community problems. This design shown here, created by my talented friend and architect, King Trung, is an example of a structure we're hoping to print for the local community. Our goal is to print 10,000 structures in the next 10 years. But we know it's going to be tough. I would say tough as hell to pull off. But that's okay. I would rather die having tried to pull something like this off in my lifetime than live comfortably knowing I could have done more to help those in need. If there's one thing I want you to take away from this talk, it's that it's never too late to capitalize on your luck and use it to benefit others. Thank you.